So after having made so many videos about Final Cut Pro 10 updates, the last one being just recently covering the 10.4.7 update, link in the description if you happen to have missed it, it never fails that immediately after the update is released, various groups and forums are filled with a bunch of posts because some people just blindly update without thinking about potential issues that any and every software update can carry with it. And of course, something does go wrong with the one or other person. Then there are those that are very much aware of the potential risks, but aren't entirely sure how to best go about updating safely, so if something does go wrong, they still have a safe path back. That's when I realized a short video about how to go about updating sensibly is long overdue. Robin here for Post Professionals, and though this video is centered around the most recent update of Final Cut Pro, because it was a bit unusual seeing several things actually came together at once, namely both a Final Cut Pro 10 and a macOS update all at the same time, these tips should still be equally usable for any future updates as well. So I'll touch quickly on the macOS update 10.15, also known as Catalina, and important things to watch for there if you haven't yet updated. If you have, and that's of no or lesser interest to you, then simply skip ahead here or here to find out about updating Final Cut Pro 10 in general. I hope, of course, this isn't too late for too many people this time around, but like I said, the following tips are equally relevant to every update in the future as well. So you might want to bookmark this video for future reference. By the way, my friend and colleague Mark Spencer from Ripple Training was additional inspiration for this video, since he in fact just released his own on the same topic, which made me think, oh yeah, this is definitely something that as many people as possible should know. If you'd like to see what he had to say on the subject, check out the description or the end cards to this video for a link. So we'll start with what to do before updating in general, then talk about how you should be updating Final Cut Pro, and end with the options you have if you actually updated without any safety net, and what you're left with if you want or need to go back to a previous version. So let's dig in. Okay, so I only want to relatively briefly touch on updating macOS, since I really consider this part common sense. If you, in fact, are looking to take the giant leap of updating both macOS and Final Cut Pro all at the same time, but also just in general, the absolute first thing you want to do, no matter what, is to make sure you have an up-to-date Time Machine or whatever backup. Whenever I see someone do this without any backup whatsoever, people, that's what Time Machine is for. It's free, it's right there, it's so simple. Ugh. Yeah, in any case, with this you can, of course, completely go back to the current state, OS, app, and all, should something actually go completely south, which can, of course, happen to anybody. In which case, you at least don't lose any valuable data, at most a lot of free time. I would personally recommend that one wait minimum for the first point update, in this case meaning 10.15.1 or higher, unless there's of course some feature you urgently need that the new operating system brings with it, whatever that might be. What you also need to check before updating, specifically in this case to Catalina, is whether any apps you definitely need are also 64-bit. Because if not, then it's game over for that particular app. Which is why I would recommend that everyone at least check the Apple site first to find out what it's all about, link in the description, and download the tool Go64, link also in the description. With this you can see which of your apps will most definitely not run after the update, or even which, marked here with an exclamation mark, may still have certain components that are not yet 64-bit. Which ironically even includes the 3 Pro apps we're talking about here. But they're clearly not in any danger of malfunctioning because of it. This only pertains to some 32-bit legacy components that were left in for Mojave. Another nice thing about the Go64 app is that you can just simply click to be automatically sent to the app's site to see whether or not there may in fact be an update for the app in question. Of course, you should also never update in the middle of a project period. All running projects should be completed first no matter what. So to protect yourself from any possible bugs or maybe incompatibilities with plugins you use that are, for example, poorly or not at all maintained, another thing you might want to check before you update. I know, for example, that at the point of the making of this video, Isotope, the makers of the otherwise very good RX7 audio filters, have also still not managed to make their plugins Catalina compatible. So if you own and need these or any other filters that have yet to be updated, then you definitely want to refrain from updating. Whereby, in their case, it doesn't even have anything to do with the 64-bitedness of the plugins, but rather with Apple's even tighter security measures in Catalina, for which installers and certain components first need to be notarized and stapled, as it's called by Apple. And as annoying as all of this is, you can't blame Apple or the software developers in the end. Blame the pirates and hackers whose activities Apple are trying to protect us from. Either way, if you do decide to update, you first want to simply right-click on the currently installed version of Final Cut, Motion, etc., and choose Compress. Simply trying to hide the app in a subfolder, by the way, won't work, because that, too, will be found and replaced by the updater of the App Store. With this, you get a zip file, which you can simply leave in the Applications folder or copy somewhere else for archiving. You can leave the actual app here since it'll be replaced with the update anyway. So if there's something wrong with the new version of whatever app, just delete it and unpack the old version. And don't worry, all plugins, other extensions, and presets are completely preserved because they're stored somewhere else, not in the app itself. But that's, of course, just the half of it, because any and all libraries that you open after you've updated Final Cut must be updated as well, as you're told the first time you open them. And the moment you click Update, there's almost no going back for the respective library, since it can obviously no longer be opened from the old version if you want or have to go back. Therefore, don't load the update just yet. Before you do, you should also back up all the libraries you know you'll need in the foreseeable future. That could be with Time Machine by zipping them as you did the app, or simply duplicating them. Of course, libraries where the media is stored in the library, those can obviously be quite big, which, due to possible space constraints alone, can make duplicating or zipping difficult or impossible, apart from it potentially taking a really long time. The alternative is to back up just the library without the media, which of course make up the bulk of the data. So how do you get the media out of the library without risking damage by, for example, just going in and tearing it out manually, which I would of course not recommend? Well, you simply need to open it, and with it selected in the library sidebar, you're given the library properties in the inspector, where you simply click the Modify Settings button behind Storage Locations. Here I can go to the first pop-up menu for media, which is set to In Library, and select Choose at the bottom. This opens a window where I can either select an existing folder that I have on my disk or create a new one with the button at the bottom left. I'll create a new one and call it Media Pit and click Choose. Media for Motion is saved outside of the library by default anyway, so we can leave it. If you want to do the same for the cache, you can, but everything that belongs to the cache, meaning render and analysis files, thumbnails, etc., are all things that can easily be regenerated. But if there is a lot of data, which you can easily check in the Library Properties window, you can either delete it safely via the File menu and delete generated library files, or manage it externally as with the media if you insist on keeping it. I'll just do it for demonstration purposes, but would normally just delete them. Select the same folder and click OK. Now we're just missing one last step, and that's clicking the second button in the Library Properties window titled Consolidate. I'm asked if I want to include any optimized or proxy media that I might have generated, which I'll leave selected and then just click OK. And if the new storage location I've chosen is on the same drive as the library itself, then the whole thing even happens instantaneously. So without any time-consuming copying to wait for, unless you have a lot of cache files, which can take a little longer to move. Of course, if the selected directory is on a different disk, then the whole thing can and will take longer, since everything needs to be copied first and then deleted from the library when it's finished. Now if I look back in the Finder and in the folder I selected for my media, I see a folder for each media type I selected to be consolidated in individual folders. A folder for the original media, and if I've selected them, a folder for optimized and proxy media, as well as a single container for all possible cache files. If I select the library now, I can see it's only a fraction of the original size. Now I can zip, copy, or duplicate it quickly and easily without having to use up an inordinate amount of space. Now I simply need to unzip it should I want to go back to the version before the update. Of course, everything you might have done with the updated version of your library will be lost. At best, you could export an XML of your project from the new version to import into the old one. But you'll have to reckon with possible translation errors, especially if you've used a new function filter or anything like that, and because some, mostly smaller things, simply don't carry over at all via XML. Currently, both the new and old version are compatible with XML version 1.8, but with every new version of Final Cut, you have to check if the XML itself was updated as well, in which case you might have to switch to the older available version to send anything downstream, so to speak, whereby normally at least the current and the previous XML version will be available when exporting, probably for this exact reason. So hopefully all of this is really helpful if I caught you before you updated anything. But if you have updated Final Cut Pro and managed to not take appropriate safety precautions, as well as updated one or more important libraries, have now run into issues, and you want to or need to go back, then the whole thing isn't quite so easy anymore. First off, you, at minimum, need to still have the older version of Final Cut somewhere in a time machine backup, for example, or maybe from another machine, because the App Store will only ever offer up the latest version of Final Cut that is compatible with the version of macOS installed on your computer. So provided that you've found an older version somewhere, there are still a few possibilities to save most everything. Otherwise, this tip won't help very much either. If you have already updated a library and made changes you want to keep, then you really only have one way to go: XML export from the new version as described before. But if you haven't made any changes yet, or if you can live with the fact that the work you've done since the update is lost, then you can still rely on the backups automatically created by Final Cut. Whereby these backups, of course, do not contain the media. That needs to come from the original library, or rather are referenced from there, or from a Final Cut archive. To use a backup, all you have to do is go to your Movies folder and look into the Final Cut Backups folder. And if you haven't cleverly switched off the backups for the respective library, you should see a folder with the same name. Herein you can find all the incremental backups Final Cut created while you were working with that library, each with date and timestamp in the name. But much more importantly, you should also see a previous versions folder here. If not, then the library was never edited with an earlier version, so there can be no previous version. Normally, these backups are, of course, meant to be opened in Final Cut via the File menu, Open Library, and From Backup, where you can in fact not only see if, but also when, as well as from which version it was saved. But since I can't, of course, open a library from a newer version, I can't even get to this menu. So back to the previous versions folder, where I can simply double-click this version, which is tiny compared to the original because it doesn't contain any media. This will open a version of the library that is compatible, again, minus any changes that I may have made since then. After that, if you prefer, you can simply change the media location back into the library and move everything back with a single click. By the way, just on a side note, after opening, whether via the Final Cut menu or by double-clicking, the backup library is copied to the same place as the original library. And even if the information says that the backup version suddenly has the same or almost the same size, that's not actually the case. Because here, Apple works very cleverly with so-called hard links. That means that the backup library is only referring to the media in the original library, similar to an alias, but different. The backup essentially adopts the size of data it's referencing, which means, somewhat confusingly, that a 1 terabyte sized library, for example, and its supposedly 1 terabyte sized backup could both live on a single 1 terabyte sized disk. Only if you were to copy this backup, say, to another disk, only then would it physically become 1 terabyte worth of data. Pretty damn clever, if you ask me. And that should hopefully do it. I sincerely hope I was able to help someone, maybe from making a horrible mistake or even getting them back out of one. I don't know. Either way, if I did, or even if you just found this to be informative, then I'd appreciate a thumbs up or even a subscription with the little bell, which really helps the channel and motivates me to continue making this free content. If you hated it, then just hit the thumbs down twice to really let me know. Questions or issues, feel free to drop them in the comments below. I hugely appreciate the support and see you in the next one.